Welcome to the Existential Stoic Podcast, episode 28, How to Enjoy Life. I'm Danny. I'm here with Randy.
Hey, Danny.
Hey, Randy. And today we're going to talk about how to enjoy life. You know, this seems like an important topic. It sounds important. I feel like it's important. Why do you think it's important? I'll go second.
Yeah, you would think people would spend more time trying to figure this out, how to enjoy life. Instead, kind of we focus on what's wrong with our life, what's not working. It's kind of like, it reminds me of that question from Rich Dad, Poor Dad, where he says that poor people just think, I can't afford it. Rich people think, how can I afford it? And so I think a lot of people just get stuck in this thing like, oh, my life sucks. Why does my life suck? Instead of like, how can I enjoy my life? How can I make my life awesome?
I like that you said that because, it's funny. I had mentioned to you when we talked earlier that, I had a rough couple days. And it's funny because I was aware of it the whole time, and it was funny because it took really just a change of perspective for me to feel better again. And, it was really what it was it was a thing with anxiety. We all suffer from it, right? It was something to do with, not to get too personal and all, but it was something to do with just like finances and stuff and like some work that I'm doing right now. And then, your imagination runs wild. You get caught up in the negativity, right? And then you find yourself sort of like, down or depressed or whatnot. And it's funny because when I got out of it and I was thinking about it, I actually thought of you too. And I was like, it's like we spend so much time stressed about what ifs, what could be, what might be, that we totally forget about like it's funny because in those days that I was down, I was having a great time with my dog. I was doing all these things that were still good and fun, and I was happy at times. But like I had this cloud of like dread and doubt and like whatever hanging over me. And it's like I thought about it. It's like, man, it's so stupid because like we stress so much about shit that doesn't matter, and we forget to just ask, how can I actually enjoy this? How can I make this pleasurable? How can I be happy? You know?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah,
absurd.
you make such a good point. I think it was Mark Twain who said, I've endured a great many tragedies in my life, most of which never happened. And,
Yeah,
and
but
that's
that's what
like,
it feels
this,
like.
oh my goodness, the fear, the anxiety, all that stuff is so real. It's so palpable. Like I had the same thing going on where there's just like, uh, there's a situation and it just produces fear and anxiety, like life-threatening fear and anxiety. But it's just like, it's imaginary. I mean, it may be real, who knows? But for the most part, it's imaginary, and all the pain and all the suffering is imaginary. And so,
That's just it too. And it's funny because, I was thinking about this today. So I wrote like a little blog post on it and I was thinking about it because like, you know, Jose Ortega, the Spanish philosopher existentialist, he talks about the imagination being necessary for human beings because with the imagination, we can create a life. We can imagine a life for ourselves. We create the conception, the idea, and then we try to actually make it happen, right? So we're always in this process of trying to be something, trying to be the person we want to be, the idea of the person that we are, the conception of a good life. So that's like the positive side of it, right? The imagination, we can use it to do all this stuff. We can solve problems. We can imagine things that were never possible. Then the other side of it, though, is that like with uncertainty, with the unknowns, the imagination also runs wild with our fear and makes us like, I think, just upset and miserable. And it's insane how that like, it's really funny how those two go together in a way that it's like this double-edged sword, I think. So, I mean,
yeah.
we're doing like we always do. We're talking around the topic, but I think
Well, I think
importantly,
it's good. I think it's good to lay down the foundation because you've got a really good point there. How there's always the positive and the negative. There's like the faith and there's the fear, and it really comes down to us to choose because no matter what, they're both going to be there. Like you look at the people who have done the most stuff in their life, they didn't get there because they had no fear in their life. They got there because whenever there was fear, they chose to be courageous and they chose to act in spite of the fear.
yeah,
And
they
so,
chose to deal with it, right? And they chose to embrace it and go forward rather than turn away. And I think 90% of our problem is we turn away, right? Sorry, I'm dealing with a dog biting my arm right now. We're playing mid freaking recording. He doesn't make it easy. But I think that's a good point, right? I think that people that do well, I think, and I'm sure they struggle too, though. That's the funny part, right? Because we always idolize these people as having like the perfect life and stuff. but it's not true. Everybody has their days. And I think, we all have our days where we sort of go forward, we embrace it, we move with it. And then there's days when we're kind of like, I think we turn away from it or hide. And that's when we do the most damage to ourselves. And it's really interesting, I think, how that works out. That, I don't know. It's when you talk about enjoying life, it's like we're living, right? We need to actually live it. And that's kind of the hard part at times. It's funny.
Yeah. Well, one really good habit that we talk about all the time, we should just call it the Small Pleasures podcast.
No shit, right?
I never thought that I never thought I'd find something that would make such a big difference. But like any days that I do this, it's just like great. Any days I don't do this, it's obvious that I'm not doing this. And it's just taking the time during the day to notice the pleasurable moments, or to notice the moments where at least it wasn't terrible. Doing that makes such a huge difference.
Well, it really does. And it's funny, like you mentioned, like you never thought you'd encounter something. Like there's so many self-help books, so many philosophies I tried to implement in my life. And that has literally made the most difference. And it was the simplest exercise I could have ever, put into practice. It takes 5 minutes, but like it really does change everything, because you start to become, I think our biggest block to enjoyment is awareness, right? We don't let ourselves be aware of the pleasures, of the joys, of the moments that matter. We're not, people always talk about being present. That's another good way to look at it. Can you hear this jackass in the background?
Yeah.
People always talk about, sorry. People always talk about, they talk about being present. And I think, you hear a lot of this bullshit. And I think people don't reflect on what it actually means. And I think it's being aware of these joys and the things that matter that are all over the world and readily available in our everyday, that we just don't pay attention to. It's like we block it or we distract ourselves from it because we have this attitude, and I find myself, that happens to me when I have anxiety or when I'm depressed, right? You get in that negative attitude and you interpret everything that way, and you miss out on all this stuff that's great or that really is a source of enjoyment.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, they're always there. It's like the yin and the yang. Even in the most painful moments, there's still little pleasures that can be found. And it just comes down to training your mind to start seeing them. And it is training. It's training like anything else. Like you have to put in the work in order to do it. Like we have been training to be able to see these things for the past few months, because every day before we go to sleep, we write down 3 of the best moments of our day. And that's training our mind to be able to pick out these things. But the more you do that, the more you get to see these beautiful things that you wouldn't otherwise see.
I'm glad you said that, because you just reminded me of something I wanted to mention. I actually was going to mention to you as not recording, but whatever, it's fine. It's funny because it's training, right? And it's so easy. But like, I was thinking about this today because like, you go on Twitter or you go online and you search self-help and you see all these things about being like, you got to be the best in this. You got to be the best in this. You got to have a 6-pack. You got to do all this. And it is overwhelming. And I think like, it's funny because when you really think about like, what kind of better life do I want? How do I enjoy my life? The things that you need to train are not that difficult. They just take practice. And like, it's funny because it is all really comes down to training. It's habits, right? We just need to form the habits. We need to form the sort of routine, the practices that will really benefit us. And oftentimes I think the easier ones are the ones you need to incorporate first, because, I'll tell you, like the small pleasures thing, I'm so happy we did it because it's so simple, but seeing that progress, seeing the actual factual change in my attitude in my everyday life, it really like emboldens me and makes me, I think, more willing to want to try new things and do other things, right? Because you see this progress, you see this like this movement forward, and you see your attitude really changing. It's amazing. It is.
Yeah, and it's self-reinforcing. Like it's something that I look forward to every day because it feels good to do.
It really does. And it's funny if you miss it, man. It's so funny how like that, just like just like if you exercise a lot and you miss your exercise routine, you feel down, or you feel like sluggish or slow. I notice the same thing. If I forget to do it at night, I have to do it first thing in the morning, because otherwise I feel like I'm not in the right headspace that day. Like I miss something crucial to my day, which is that little exercise that takes 5 minutes.
Yeah. Like one of the things that I love from it is, how in movies you see people like cuddled up on a couch with a cup of coffee and you're like, oh, that looks so nice. Why can't I ever have that in my life? And it's like, Now I have that in my life because I'm able to recognize that moments and recognize how much I like it. And then at the end of the day, not only did I have that moment in my day, but at the end of the day, I can again relive that moment in my life. It's really extraordinary.
No, it is. And I think you hit the nail on the head right there, right? It's awareness, it's being aware of it because we all have those moments. It's not like, and I mean, it's funny because we get these reinforced these moments that are reinforced in movies and stuff of like what the ideal moment is, the ideal relationship, all this BS. But in reality, we all have that in some way, shape, or form in our own lives. And it's just a matter of recognizing it. And I think this is crucial to like, if we want to enjoy our lives, you said it at the beginning, right? The question is, how do I do that? How do I start enjoying my life? Not, I'm so bummed out that I'm not enjoying it, that I'm unhappy, but it's how can I do it, right? How do I make it happen? And I think a big step forward towards that is putting into practice things that make us more self-aware and more aware of the little things in our everyday that are already good, because that's part of that attitude building exercise to get to that positive mindset that I think really life enjoyment's all about.
Yeah, definitely. Starting now where you are with what you have is really important. And also getting rid of the mindset, when I get this, then I'll be happy. When I do that, then I'll be happy. When I have this, then I'll be happy. Because that is just basically it holds your happiness for ransom. Because that's basically saying that I need something outside of where I am right now to be happy, to enjoy my life. And whereas whenever I see myself doing that, because even though I know this stuff intellectually, oftentimes I'm living life and it's not there in real life. But like whenever I see myself doing that, like when I think, oh, when I'm there, then I'll be happy, I flip it on myself. I say, no, that's a false mindset. When I'm happy, then I'll be there. And I focus instead on being happy where I am, because I realize that whatever mindset I bring here, I'm going to have when I get there. So I need to focus on the mindset I want here, and then I'll get there.
I like that you said that, man, because it's so funny. Like, first of all, what we know, I was saying this in one of my classes, it's like, it's kind of funny that we know, like, intellectually, we know a lot. I think each individual knows more than they give themselves credit for. Like, especially if you talk about like the good life, morality, what you should be doing, what's the right course for you, what's the right direction. I think we all actually have a fair amount of knowledge. What we put in practice is like abysmal in comparison to what we know. And it's funny because it's like we need to be reminded of the same crap over and over again. But I also like that idea too of flipping it, and not giving ourselves this false idea that it's about a goal that we have to achieve. Because I think that's, we always talk about happiness as like, it's funny, I tell my students this all the time in philosophy, when you're looking at ethics and stuff in the good life, it's always sort of portrayed not as an end to be achieved, but as something lived. It's a process. It's something you're doing, because it makes no sense to talk about an end. It makes no sense to say, okay, at this point, now you're enjoying life. When you get this job, now you're enjoying it. You weren't before, but now you are, because it's like you carry yourself with you always, right? You're always going to be there. The world's always going to be around you. And I think enjoying life is something that's part of that. It has to be part of that process. And I think you can enjoy it at any stage, because I think you can enjoy the process of like, I mean, look, I'm not necessarily where I want to be in my life, but I am enjoying it. And I think it's incredible how if you come with the right attitude, you can make anything really better and just more enjoyable and fun. And you're like, I don't know, you feel your energy levels are up, right? It's amazing. Like, I was just thinking about that today, because like I feel so much better today than I did 2 days ago, and literally nothing has changed except my attitude. It's like, it's amazing when you think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's really important what you said, that life has to be lived. Like, I guess maybe from fairy tales or something like that, or maybe games that we play as kids, we think it's always happily ever after. Like you get somewhere and then it's happily ever after. But it's not. It's like a series of waypoints. Like you want something, there's some struggle to get it, you overcome that struggle, you get it, and then the next day there's another problem. It's like, that's the way that it goes. But I'm always reminded of like the Buddha, because everybody thinks like achieving enlightenment is this amazing thing. And so I'm reminded of the Buddha, and they say, what happened to the Buddha after, or what did the Buddha do after enlightenment? And he said another 10,000 hours on the cushion.
Yeah.
So it's just like you just keep going, but you're not where you were before. You're at a better place, and you just need to find out where you want to go, and from there, chart your course.
It's funny. There's a book I really like is called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. I think I mentioned it to you before. And I believe it's in that book where he says, it's one of the Zen masters talking, and he's like, they're like, people always ask me, like, when you meditate, what are you doing? And he's like, well, when we sit, we sit. When we breathe, we breathe. When we walk. And when we lay. And it's like, it's funny because it's like, we always, maybe it's like consumerism or something. We have this expectation of like something has to come with it. That if I'm going to buy into what you're selling, I need to get this thing out of it. I have to get some very clear benefits, some very clear goal. And it's like you're missing the point, right? Because it's about living life. It's about doing it and finding, the peace or the satisfaction or whatever in the process, not in some end that you're going to achieve or something. I think this is, it's interesting because I think this is really what does screw us up when we talk about enjoying life or however you want to phrase it, being happy, being content, enjoying. I mean, I think it really is about finding something within us is a big part of it, or learning how to live with ourselves, maybe is a way to say it.
Yeah. It's the what's in it for me mindset, where everything has to be to your benefit. And I still to this day, there's still a lot of that in what I do. Like I always look what's in it for me. But also I see that, sometimes there are things that I just have to do. Like, especially when they're things that have a long-term benefit, like exercising every day. Some days I don't want to. It feels terrible. Like I'm just going through the exercises and I'm like, well, what's in it for me? Why should I do this? And it's like, because actually enduring through this boredom, through this monotony, through these rote exercises, this actually builds something within me that I didn't have before. And so sometimes dropping that what's in it for me mindset is helpful in the long term, because we can't see in the short term what the benefits are.
Well, no, I think, yeah, that's a good point, right? It's like, in the short term, it's like we always have that problem of perspective where any gains that we achieve are usually lost because we're too close. You don't see the incremental improvements. So it's not until you step back. I mean, that's oftentimes why when we do a self-assessment at like 6 months or a year and we look back years in the past, we see these large improvements, but it's like we don't see them as they happen because they're so small. And I think, exercise is a great example, right? You got to get through the BS. You have to get on your mat. You have to do the routine to see any improvement. And if you're looking for like some advancement that day, it's not going to happen. I mean, even when I remember when I was working out a ton, like I'd be thrilled to get one extra rep in or something. And it's like really in the scheme of things, it's so minimal because you're looking at it on a day by day basis. It's such small increments, but it's, I think you said it before, right? It's we overestimate what we can do in a day and underestimate what we can do in a year or 10 years. It's like that long-term thinking is crucial, I think, for any kind of goal or any kind of self-improvement attitude. You have to have it.
Yeah. So back to how to enjoy life, because potentially some people listen to this. Yeah, right. Potentially some people listen to this because maybe they're not enjoying life and they want to find out how to enjoy life. Let's kind of flesh out some things that they can do if they're not in a good space to start enjoying life.
Yeah, when we thought up this topic, I was thinking about it because I think those are, obviously the hardest times, I think, in our life when it comes to enjoyment are always the darkest. It's obviously when we have anxiety, when we have depression, it's a challenge to even like sometimes get out of bed or do anything. And it seems like, the idea of enjoyment seems so far away. Like, you might have you might laugh at something like sort of like sarcastically, or you might have a moment, but just enjoyment seems so alien because I think everything is painted with this negative brush. And I think really like for myself, I think that's a crucial thing that I started doing so much more in the last probably year and a half, 2 years, but really trying to practice self-awareness trying to your best. I mean, and it's by no means am I an expert at this yet, but it gets better every time. When your mood changes or when you're in a negative mood, even if it's right now, identifying it, recognizing it, and saying to yourself, like, this doesn't have to be the case. Whether you change your situation, you go for a walk, whether you exercise, whether you just get a shower, whether you do anything to get yourself out of that situation, to kind of make yourself aware that this doesn't have to be the case. You're interpreting it this way, I think, is a really good starting point. Because if you're not aware of it, or if you're not admitting it, you're not going to get out of it. You're not going to enjoy anything.
That's a really great point. And I missed that point for a long time in my life, where I'd think my life is terrible instead of just I'm in a bad mood.
Yeah.
And they've done studies that, like, your mood over 93% correlates with your perspective on life. So if you're in a bad mood, you're going to think your life is terrible. If you're in a good mood, you're going to think your life is great, which is awesome. But like most of the time when we're in a good mood and we think our life is great, we're not analyzing our life. It's only when we get into a bad mood and we think our life is terrible that we want to start sitting down and trying to figure this thing out because it's uncomfortable. So like being able to recognize that is really helpful. And a couple of things that I do along with that is, one, whenever I recognize that I'm in a bad mood, I just let myself be in a bad mood. Because I read this from Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, where like we get into a bad mood and we think we have to fix it. But potentially a bad mood is just an indication that we're taking life too seriously. And so whenever I recognize I'm in a bad mood, I'm like, ooh, okay, I'm in a bad mood. This too shall pass. Let's try not to take it so seriously. And
I absolutely love that point. It's funny too that you mentioned, like, you didn't learn that till very late. It's like, yeah, dude, I'm almost 39. It's like, I wish that's something I knew, man, when I was like 8, and really took to heart, because it's so important, just recognizing it. And I think you're right. Sitting with it is like, I think a big part of it too is like that a big block to enjoyment is this culture that believes we always have to be comfortable. We always have to be in a good mood. We always have to be celebrating our fucking life. We always have to be doing something exciting. Everything we do has to be done with like 150% joy and bullshit. And I think it's toxic because it really paints life in a very unrealistic way. And like, the truth is like, yeah, sometimes you're going to have bad days, and it's okay. If you identify it, even if you just sit with it, you at least are aware of it, and you are aware that it's just an attitude. It's a way of looking at things, or it's a situational thing that can change. Maybe you're in a bad mood because of the people you're around, or because you have to do something crappy at work that you don't want to do. But the fact is that will change. You can make it change, but it might not be immediate. And I think that thinking is so bad because it makes everybody think like, I need to be pleased now. Like, if I'm not comfortable, if I'm not doing something, and I think that leads to sitting on the couch watching Netflix, sort of like distracting yourself, or sitting on the phone browsing through bullshit, because that makes you feel comfortable even though you're just hiding from things. It's the same as like drinking or doing. I mean, I think it's the same as anything else, right? If you're hiding from, how you feel and you're not aware of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what you said there was just being aware of it. Like, that's the importance of that is crucial. And I used to get to this point of awareness where I'd like, yeah, I know I'm in a bad mood, but I'm not supposed to be in a bad mood. But it's like trying to recognize that bad moods are okay, that they'll pass, and that you just need to be gentle with yourself while you're in this bad mood, and then allowing that to be.
I mean, I think that's a great point, right? Being gentle with ourselves, being caring with ourselves, or understanding, right? That we would understand somebody else in such a situation. Why aren't we as forgiving to ourselves? I mean, we talked about this before with relations to, when we did the episode on self-love, I think it was, when we were talking about like the things we say to ourselves, could you imagine saying it to another person? And I think that's a great way to think about it, because like when you really are in a bad mood and you think to yourself, like, I shouldn't be in this mood, blah, blah. It's like, well, you would give somebody else slack. You would give them room in a situation like this. So you should give it to yourself first and foremost, I think, right? To be healthy and to have a healthy mindset. And, with that, I think too, like, I think part of attitude too is it's not only recognizing it, but it's also once you recognize it, it's starting, I think, to become aware of our situation and ourselves and embrace the idea that we can change it. We can change our attitude. We can change our situation, that we are very good at solving problems. I mean, that's what we're basically equipped to do, whether it's, with our circumstances, with ourself, whether it's self-improvement, changing your job, changing your place, whatever. Like, we are built to do that. I think once you recognize the situation, you recognize it's okay to feel that way. You also have to admit to yourself that it's possible to change, that it's possible to make this better. Because I think, at least for me, a lot of enjoyment comes from the process of improvement, right? Of making my life better, of trying to make my life better. Even when I fail, I still enjoy it because at least I'm working on it and taking action. And I think, with that self-awareness and recognizing our attitude, we also start to develop agency. We start to take responsibility for it. And that is also positive with respect to action moving forward.
Definitely. It's very important to realize that you can change your life. And I would highly recommend everyone read the book Learned Optimism by Martin Seligman, because he actually goes through this whole thing about how basically we have the power to change our lives. And when we forget we have that power, we learn helplessness. That is identical to depression in every single way. So like thinking that we're not able to change the situation or not able to act out on our anger or solve these problems that we have, that just creates helplessness within us, which manifests as depression.
Yeah, it's funny. I think so often that stuff is misdiagnosed, where people just need to get out and do something. They need to take control of their lives, take ownership of their situation. It's funny you mentioned that. Like, every time I feel down, I actually turn to philosophy, and it's really the same basic set of rules are being preached, right? Which is you have the power to change your life. This is your life. You have to take control. You have to take ownership. I mean, it's all these things that are really, I think, they're basic truths of the human condition, if you want to call it, right? That, we do have more power than we give ourselves credit to. Our attitude, our actions, they are our own. It's up to us to live our life. And, once you start recognizing that, taking ownership, I think things always get better because you're in the driver's seat. Whether you think of it like writing your own narrative and creating the story of your life, whether you think of it like driving, however you want to create the metaphor, right? I think it's true, right? Because once we start doing that, we just feel better because I think we, I don't know, it's like you start realizing that, I think your self-awareness improves, your agency improves, and you start realizing that, you matter in this world because it is your life. And that's important.
Yeah, without a doubt. So, so far we've said be aware, recognize that you can change your life. I think we touched on one earlier is gratitude. That's huge.
Yeah.
And it's probably one of the hardest steps early on to be grateful. And so I just say, just start doing it. It's one of those things where like, if you want to play guitar, you're not going to pick up a guitar and be able to shred on it immediately. You're going to pick up a guitar and struggle to hold the pick and struggle to press down a string, and then your finger is going to hurt. But it's like you need to get in there and actually go through that stuff in order to be good with it. So like with the gratitude, just start every day. 3 things you enjoyed that day. And or 3 things that weren't terrible. 3 things that were like neutral. Just start there and start doing it every day. And then it's amazing how fast of a difference it'll make. Like I think within a week, both of us were just like, holy cow, this is incredible.
It was absolutely amazing. And like on top of that, it's like, it's so simple, but it's like anything else that you're right? It's like guitar, typing, whatever, right? Once it becomes part of your routine, once you put enough practice in, it becomes part of you really. Like you don't think about it anymore. I hardly think about doing it at night. And I mean, I'm so like when we first started, we both talked about it, right? You struggle to find things that are pleasurable, that are small delights. And then you realize like you're seeing them all the time because you're just aware of it, right? And it's amazing. So I think, gratitude is important. It is often difficult because I think, when we're in our worst times, when we're our most depressed or most angry, it's sometimes hardest to see through the opaque glasses, so to say, and to kind of start to clear them up or get the crud off the mirror, if you want to use, other metaphors, I guess, or whatever.
How
Yeah, I
many
think that's
metaphors
really
can you use at once?
right. We'll just keep going. We'll make it an hour of just metaphors for
Yeah.
security, windshield obscurity, seeing through, starting to see positive, clear. Let me think. Get out of that dark basement, start to see the
Letting the
light.
silt settle in the cup, all this fun stuff. Yeah.
That's a good one. I like that one too.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think that's good. I think also too. I think really like, and this carving out. I mean, that's part of gratitude too, but carving out some time in the day for yourself. You know, we all claim to be busy. If you look at studies, I probably mentioned this before, but if you look at studies, Americans on average use their cell phones for 4 to 5 hours a day. They watch, I think, on average, like 4 to 8 hours of television. So you definitely have time. Like, there's definitely time. But I think carving out time for yourself each day, even if it means like, you know, like I do my journaling sometimes. Like, I'll wait till nighttime when, the puppy's asleep, when my significant other's asleep, and I'll do it because it takes 15 minutes and I'm up anyway. Or setting your alarm and getting up a little bit early, but starting to carve out just a small bit of time for yourself to work on these things, it really will get you motivated to start working on yourself. And that little time can very quickly turn into a lot of time because you start realizing, I think, I noticed this myself. The more you change your attitude, the more you start to improve things for yourself, the more you start to see stuff like TV, movies, all this stuff that's a distraction and a waste. You start to see it for what it is, and you start to use it in a more healthy manner. You start to develop a healthy relationship. Like, I mean, I guess I don't have anything wrong with watching TV. I love stories. I love reading. I love watching TV. And I think it's a great thing to do to relax. But if it's all you're doing, it's robbing you of your agency. It's a way to cope. And I think you start to see that. And it's so beneficial once you recognize that because you start to get out of that mindset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Taking the time to just be with yourself is really important. And it gets us out of the busyness of life because, like everybody wakes up, 5 minutes before they have to leave for work. They get out of bed in a hurry. They're already behind. Then they're rushing to work, stuck in traffic, doing a job they hate to do, pretending to do it when they're really just on social media. They rush home in rush hour traffic to get home to, shove dinner down their face and sit in front of a TV for 4 hours before they go to sleep and repeat the process. And it's like, just by taking that 15 minutes to yourself, or you could start with 5 minutes, but just by taking that time, it starts to build a little habit. And then you have this little wonderful world of yourself where nothing can bother you because it's just like, this is your time.
And it's funny too. I think one of the other things too is just starting. People get so stressed about it because they look at these examples, they read these self-help books, and it always makes it seem like you have to do so much. And it's like, you don't have to do all that at first. Like, you just got to start, and setting yourself a little bit of time. It's really, I think we forget how much of it is just about starting to be comfortable with yourself and develop self-awareness. Like, most of it, enjoying life, I think, is about being self-aware and being present and learning how to do that. And it's like, it sounds so simple, but it's so hard to do, I think, for us. I mean, I find myself, I still distract myself sometimes. I still find myself struggling sometimes, but the better you get at it, the more you recognize it, the more you pull yourself out of it, and the less time you spend like that. And I think that's crucial because you really do. You start to see, I think, that life, it doesn't have to be that bad. We work ourselves up. We use all these things as a means to make the life however we want to interpret it. If it's negative and we want it to be negative, we watch the news, we do all this stuff, and we make it that way. And it's like, it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah, I think time for yourself is essential. So we have time to ourselves. We have gratitude. We have take action, which I just said, I guess.
I'd like to suggest one. So this is a really important one that I've found makes a huge difference, is get outside.
Oh, God, yeah.
Get outside. Like, ideally, go for a half an hour to an hour long walk. It doesn't have to be anything insane, and it can be through a city where people are. It can be through nature. And like, I would stress that while you're going through a city where people are, don't try to pretend to be happy in front of them. Let them see you being miserable. Let them see you, like, you can just have a scowl on your face and you can be that person walking by with a scowl, but just get out there and do it, because every time I look back and I was depressed in life or things were going well, I was stuck in a room with the lights off and the shades drawn. You know, it's like if you want to break that pattern, get outside and go for a walk.
It's funny. Yeah, dude, getting outside is so helpful because it gets us away from all the bullshit too. It gets us away from all the stuff like you said. I mean, most of the times when we're depressed, we're laying in bed, the blinds are, closed, TV's on. It's like everything is artificial. There's nothing natural. I mean, we are at the end of the day still animals. And I think being outdoors is essential. We need that sunlight. You don't feel a connection to the world inside that you do outside. When you feel the warm sun, you feel the breeze, you hear the animals, you get away from the human environment, I think is so healthy. Even if it's just around your block and you're still in the neighborhood, I think it's better than nothing. Like it really is. Like it makes such a difference. Because again,
And
you're doing something for yourself. That's the other important thing, right? You're setting time aside to go outside, which is I think what people miss so much about this is like it's setting time for yourself to do something positive, right?
yeah, yeah. And I made a habit of doing this, going for a walk every day. And it's so interesting, the mindset before and the mindset after. Like so many times before I go outside, I go for this walk. I'm like, I don't want to go for this walk. Going outside for a walk isn't going to do anything for me. I'm not going to enjoy this. And then a half an hour later, I get back and I'm just like, that was like amazing. Whoa.
Yeah. No, it's incredible. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that too, because it's like, it's a total shift in how you feel and how you think for the simplest thing, right? The simplest action. I go for walks every day. I love it. It's like one of my favorite things. I love hiking because I think it makes you feel better. It gives you a chance just to be with your thoughts, to be with yourself. Nietzsche always used to say that, like to do philosophy, you need to be walking. Like, yeah, he did a lot of his writing on hikes. Like, I think it's good for the mind, right? It gets your body moving. You get time to yourself. You don't have your phone. You don't have all this crap out that's distracting you. You get time. We don't really, I mean, I think this is one of our biggest problems nowadays. We don't give ourselves a lot of time to think. Everything is with a screen. Everything is with a distraction, music, something on in the background that's, really, it doesn't give us just time to be with our own thoughts. And I think that's, a big factor that gets in the way of happiness and enjoyment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a big difference. The
Damn, I feel like there's something else you said there too that I wanted to comment on, and now I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, I
But
just
I
had
like
another
it.
thing that I was going to recommend doing, and it just went.
It happens. That stuff happens though, and it's oh, you know what? No, I know what it was. Yeah, you said like you were saying too when you walk, like if you're angry, show it, right? Don't feel like you have to hide it because I think that's another great point. This idea that the idea that you're on camera for the world, right? That video camera of the world is constantly turned on you, following you, and you have to portray yourself a certain way because if you don't, right, everybody's going to be upset with you or something's going to happen and blah blah blah, and then you turn it on yourself and you see yourself through that lens and it's ridiculous, right? You have to let that go because if we're always evaluating ourselves on those social terms too, we never give ourselves a chance to breathe or really think for ourselves about what we want to be or who we want to be, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for a long time, people would always come up to me and they'd be like, "Why are you so sad?" or "Why are you so angry? What's wrong?" And it took me a long time to realize that I just have like a resting bitch face, and but like now I recognize it and I embrace it as part of me. And so people come up and they're like, "Why are you so angry?" And I'm like, that's just my face. Like it doesn't bother me anymore. I enjoy that part of myself and I'm able to just be myself around people and not have to worry about having them think that I'm happy.
I think that hits the nail on the head, right? This idea that you have to show your happiness to everyone. And on a side note, I never thought that about you, and I've known you for a very long time, so I always knew when you were happy. But I guess I also know you well, so it's different. Maybe it's different. I don't know. But it's funny, it's like that idea that we have to show this to the world, our happiness, that we always have to be happy for everybody else. And it's like, well, it's also too like, when people say like, how are you doing today? And like the common response is, I'm good. Well, blah. It's like when 99% of the time, that's not true for most people, right? It's like I think that's a big part of it though, right? Is starting to be honest with ourselves about how we feel, how we're doing. Our mood is the biggest step to starting to change it and improve it. Because if we're not honest about ourselves, we're lying to ourselves, we're constantly covering it up, hiding it, and we're never going to get to that next step. which is actually enjoying life, right? Which is actually
Hmm.
getting to the stage where we start living on the life that we want and enjoying it and, doing what we want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, part of how to enjoy yourself, a lot of the stuff that we've talked about, these are like fundamentals. These are things that like are pretty easy to implement, but they make a big difference.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I would go further to say that another thing that you can do that'll really, it seems counterintuitive, but that'll really impact your happiness and your enjoyment of life is to get uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so, like, in order to learn new things, in order to do new things, you have to be uncomfortable. It has to be like, I'm way out. I'm like outside of my comfort zone. This doesn't feel good. I don't want to be here. But it's like, I don't want to be here in the realm of something you want to do. And starting to do that while it's uncomfortable for those moments, it starts to really help make your life better because you're growing. And like when you're growing in life, you automatically feel happy.
You do. I think, I always loved how, it's often misinterpreted, but Nietzsche always said that, like, what is pleasure? It's the feeling of the growth of power, right? And what is happiness? It's the feeling that one's powers are growing. And I think that's really what it is, right? It's this feeling that we're growing, that we're doing better, that we're realizing ourselves in the world. That is happiness. That is pleasure. That is enjoyment. And like, we call a lot of other things happiness or pleasure that really aren't. But discomfort's essential because any growth, any change requires some level of discomfort. But when you embrace it, when you want it, it's not the same thing as that normal feeling of discomfort. So getting comfortable in discomfort is like a great way to start preparing yourself for taking control, right? For owning your life and starting to live the way you want. I think it's a great recommendation.
Hmm. And if you're looking for like a quick start method for doing that, just start taking cold showers. Like
Yeah.
simple as that. That is uncomfortable. It's something 100% you can survive through, but it's something that definitely will help you deal with being uncomfortable. Because after a while of doing it, you're just like, it's cold. Okay. It
Yeah.
actually helped me out so much because the water heater broke in the house where I was living. And so for a week, everybody else couldn't take showers, but I was just taking cold showers in the middle of winter and totally fine.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like that's a great example too, because it's physical discomfort, but like you said, you'll live through it. It's just cold water, dude. It ain't gonna kill you. You'll be fine. It might be shocking. It might be annoying. It might be uncomfortable and unpleasant, but you'll get through it, right? And I think that's a great example. Like, those feelings of discomfort are not something we have to hide from. We always think though that it's like, the second we think of discomfort, we gotta get out of here. We have to make it pleasurable. Turn the temperature up. Screw it. I'm not showering. And it's like, you forget too that you're more uncomfortable not showering for a week than just taking a cold shower. It's, that
Mm-hmm.
trade off, it almost doesn't make sense, but it's that immediacy that we expect, right? That really, I think, damages it so much for all of us because we're not equipped to then get ready to live life, deal with change, deal with progress, and start actually making development that we are happy, right? And we are actually enjoying things and making it better. I like that one.
Mm-hmm.
Discomfort's important. It is. I
And
think
patience.
with that too, I was going
Be-
to say the other recommendation too I have too is just I think you know probably not enough people do it maybe, but like again with that time you carve out for yourself, setting aside time to read or to learn something new. I put those hand in hand because I think reading I think is good because you're always learning and you're experiencing new things obviously. But if you don't want to necessarily read, you don't have to learn like a new skill, whether it's like an instrument or like programming or something you can do easy at home by yourself because I think of both of those, you also set aside time for yourself. It's something proactive that you're doing. You're taking agency, and you're also learning all the things we've talked about in the process: being uncomfortable, dealing with discomfort, dealing with the struggle of learning, setting yourself a goal. Being an agent, taking control of your situation. All that sort of built into it, and I think you can. One thing I always practice too, or I did a lot before, was doing things like that with a positive attitude, even if I had to force it, was a great way to sort of help build that positivity in my mind and get myself to a point where things were easier to do and I was enjoying it more.
hmm Yeah, you've got such a good point with the positivity. So like in computers, there's this saying, garbage in, garbage out. That like if you put bad stuff into a program, you're going to get bad stuff out. And it's the same thing with our brain, where if we put garbage into our brain, we're going to get garbage out. Like our life's going to suck if all we do is watch news and social media. But if you start putting positive stuff in, then you start getting positive stuff out. So like overloading your brain with just positive material, like inspirational books, good stuff to listen to, motivational recordings, all this different stuff. If you just load that up into your brain, before you know it, that'll become the default processing system of your brain, and your life will be so much better.
Yeah, this podcast, right? No, it's so true though. It is. I had to plug it, right? No, but it's so true that if you do that, I think you're right. It's just that repetition, and it's 100. I mean, it's funny when we started doing this, like 6 months ago or whatever it was. I don't know how long ago it was. It was a while. Wait, 20? Yeah, about probably 6 or 7 months ago. I noticed that too. Just doing this every week, focusing on topics that were relevant for us and all, like the improvement was so crazy. How much things have improved for me because you're giving yourself, again, we were setting aside time to do something we wanted. It was something fun, but it was also that reinforcement of those ideas all the time that you need in life because, people forget, online, on the news, how much the negative is reinforced constantly. And you're just bombarded with that shit. So it's hard to be optimistic. It's hard to have a good attitude. It's hard to enjoy things when everything around you is like a dark thundercloud. Like if you remember those like cartoons, right? And it's like almost impossible.
Yeah. And I've felt the same way, how just doing this makes a big difference. I would say one of the last ones in terms of happiness and how to enjoy your life is patience. You got to be patient. Yeah. So like it's the importance of patience is very well understated. We live in a culture of immediate gratification. We're so used to ordering something. If we don't get it by tomorrow, better yet today, then we're pissed off. It's like, but things take time, and especially good things, they take a lot of time and they take a lot of work. And noticing that and actually setting yourself up with that expectation that it's going to take a long time. Like one of the things that I started doing recently is recognizing that things take time. And so allotting myself that time. Like when I take on new things, like for instance, I'm working to be a computer programmer, and I realize that, I would love to be a great computer programmer in a year or in 4 years, but I realize that in order to become good and give myself a reasonable chance of doing that, it's probably going to take 10 years of working on every day, because that's pretty much how long it takes to get really good at something. And so by recognizing that and being patient and allowing myself the time that it's going to take that long, it actually takes a lot of the pressure off now, and I'm able to actually enjoy and learn more now in what I'm doing than if I was like, oh, I need to be the best computer programmer in like 3 months, because then you're just stressed about it. You can't focus on it. Whereas now I'm like, oh, I don't understand this, but you know what? Let's go on to the next thing. And if I still don't get it by then I'll come back and I'll explore, because I have 10 years.
You know what I love about that, though? That idea of patience, too. You're showing that a shift in your perspective makes it more likely that you'll get these things done, that you'll enjoy doing them, that you'll have the energy to do them, and that you're going to be appropriate with yourself and how you treat yourself and in your evaluation, because you set a reasonable expectation on what it takes to do it and actually be good at it, rather than a hackneyed sort of screwed up idea of perfect in a day that never works, right? And I think that's so true, right? We need patience. We need to be able to recognize that things take time, because life takes time, right? We're not going to develop all the skills we want now. I think that's a great point, and I think everything we've talked about is so good for enjoying life, because it's about living, like we said. And I think all the points we made are about learning to be comfortable with yourself and live, right? And be happy and have the right attitude that you approach your life with.
Yep. Anything else you want to add for how to enjoy your life?
I mean, I think that's good. I think, again, like repetition, perspective is important. Attitude is important. Yeah, you got one? Go for it.
Mm-hmm. Friends are important.
Oh, Jesus, right? Aristotle called them the greatest of external goods. God damn. I almost forgot that.
Yeah, relationships, insanely important. I mean, just being able to spend this time with you every week definitely makes a big impact in my week.
Oh, dude, same here. And you know it's funny? Like you said that too with relationships. Like I think friendship, relationships in general, and honesty. Because you need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to be honest with yourself about the relationships you have in order to form good ones and healthy ones. But yeah, that's probably one of the most crucial ones too. Having somebody you can have an accountability buddy, right? Somebody you can work with, somebody you can talk to about things makes things so much better and makes it possible to enjoy life because you can also just have fun together, right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Cool.
awesome. That was fun.
That
Yeah.
was fun. And you introduced
That,
the episodes. It's your job to wrap it up.
oh, right, right. I did. You're right. God. So this was How to Enjoy Life, episode 28. If you can, we are on YouTube now. So if you're listening on Spotify or whatever, or another podcast app, please check us out. Check out the channel, subscribe. Otherwise, subscribe, share, like. We can do that now, right? Yeah, do
Hmm.
all that stuff. We really appreciate everyone listening. And we'll be back midweek with another quick fix. I think this week we're going to look at being more creative. So that's going to be fun. Join us midweek. And until then, I will see you later, Andy.
All right, later, Danny.
Peace.